All right, guys. Well, here we are. So I think I already explained it. The way that it's going to work on Patreon from this point forward is the first week or however long it takes, I'm going to do a story for each storyline, right? So I'll do a Florida for all tiers. I'll do a what really happened for all tiers. China's going to stay exclusive for the $20 tier. Parting with celebrities, that'll go on for the sponsor tier. But each one of these storylines, I'll do all tiers the first week. That way, if I say something or like I'm talking about a storyline that you want to keep following, you know which tier you should sign up for, you know? It also just gives me a chance to hook everybody on Patreon up with extra content. And then I'm going to try to start moving all of these storylines forward a lot more quickly than I was doing in the past. I typically don't watch videos that I do, like my own videos, because it makes me self-conscious. It's like I say cringeworthy stuff. You know, there's only so much of me being like, oh, I'm such a bitch, where I'm like, man, you sound cool when you say that. You know, I mean, no, I cringe. I'm like, oh my God, my dad watches this. He probably thinks I'm a bitch. You know, stuff like that. Or like I'm always talking about butt fucking, sex riots. That's pretty much all I talk about. But my mom watches this shit. You know, what is she thinking? What is my mom thinking when I'm talking about that? No, who knows? I don't know. I don't think she really cares. I think it's to the point with them where nothing really shocks them. But anyway, I do sometimes have to listen. Like I'll skim through and I'll listen to stuff to, you know, kind of figure out where I'm at chronologically, you know, for where the story is. And I was listening to the story, What Really Happened. I did a free one for all tiers last month, but it's a new month, so I'm going to keep going with this storyline. I guess eventually I might do the storyline on YouTube, except some of the information is sensitive, especially like this story. I'm going to get into like really personal stuff. I don't know if I want everybody to kind of rip my head off for it. You know, that's what happens a lot in these confessional style videos. It's like you're honest with people and then people use it against you. And that's just the nature of making your life public, especially if your life was a train wreck, which is okay. Because I lived a pretty fucked up life for a long time, and it might be a waste if I didn't share it with the world. At least there's a therapeutic value if you've been through some of this stuff. Maybe it'll remind you not to continue on a certain path. If you've never been on that path, you might find it interesting, but at the same time, it's dissuasive from ever smoking crack, you know? It's not like you're going to be in that situation socially. You're like at like a company barbecue and some girl's like, hey, you want to smoke some rock? And you're like, yeah, I've never done that before. It sounds fucking bomb. Let's go. And then you guys just start smoking crack. And then you're robbing pharmacies in Iowa about 2 weeks later. So you know not to do that because of me. Also, I think that, I don't know, I just think that there's some good positive social implications about sharing past mistakes that you've made, especially in like an honest way. You know, now when I get into this storyline, I think you're probably going to say that I lied to you before. I wasn't lying to you. I was lying to my parole officer, who was clearly watching my shit at the time. I couldn't just flat out admit that I'd relapsed. It was so obvious. Like you look back on some of these videos that I did from this time period, it's clear that I'm high as fuck in them. I look horrible. You know, I look like the before picture for Proactive. And I couldn't just be like, yeah, I'm strung out right now. You know, I had to be dishonest to a degree. But I'm going to get into all of that. But what I was saying is when I watched when I was watching this particular storyline video, God, you see how my mind works? It's just ADD everywhere. This was like right after I'd done peyote. Without even knowing that I was taking it. And, you know, it was a small dose. It's not like I tripped for multiple days, but still, that's a very, very powerful substance. And eventually I want to do a psychedelic storyline where I outline all that, but it was obvious how out of it I was on that last video. I was like impressed. I like couldn't even believe that I was able to fucking function well enough to tell a story at all. I don't know. What I'm trying to say is I impress myself sometimes. I was impressed, though. I mean, if you knew, like, how nightmarish and, like, vividly hallucinatory that particular trip was, I think you might have sympathy for the fact that I even attempted that shit the next day. But you can hear it. I'm, like, slurring. I'm not as quick, as witted as normal, you know? Like, I stutter. I'm a butt fuck, you know? I just couldn't say things with lucidity. So with that completely nonsensical meandering preamble, let's get into the video. So this is what really happened last year. And before I even get into it, let me say this final thought on it. It's difficult for me to be honest about this particular video because it was such a horrible time for me. Horrible. Like, soul-shattering, dark, shampoo bottles up the ass with, like, sucking on, you know, carrots with razor wire coiled around it. That's a metaphor, but you know what I mean. All right, so let's get into it. So where we had left off last time, you know, I mean, I got out of prison and my dad helped me to some degree. I mean, much more so, and I'm not, like, discounting that help because it's much more so than most people get from their parents. He helped me get a place. He had given Karina a car while I was in prison, even though she couldn't drive because her license had been taken. Paid my cell phone, my car insurance. I mean, he basically took care of everything with the understanding, the caveat that I would become independent. A lot easier said than done. You know, it's tough when you've been stigmatized with felonies, when you have multiple people that are depending on you financially. Remember, I have Karina, I have Nico, and then I have this editor guy with me. I tried to get work. You know, I went to try to do sales because that's the only thing that I've ever really been good at outside of writing and telling stories is selling shit, you know? But I just couldn't do it that time. I don't know why. Probably because selling roofs is so fucking complicated. And I didn't necessarily like climbing on people's roofs. And at this particular place, you had to get a foldable ladder. It's like $400 on Amazon. You know, one of these like portable ladders that go in the back of your car. I was too embarrassed to tell my boss that I couldn't even afford that. So what I would do is I'd show up at these leads and I just bullshit my way into using the homeowner's ladder and be like, oh yeah, I forgot it when I was doing another estimate for another client, you know, and people be like, oh my God, do you want to use mine? I'm like, well, if you're offering, I will, you know, and I talk like that. And then some people be like, why are you talking like Jim Carrey? I'd be like, well, I don't really have an explanation for you. I didn't even sound like him. That was some cracked out version. Anyway, point is that shit didn't work. Then I go and I work at this telemarketing place, which was essentially like like a boiler room, you know? There were literally guys that wore like homeless hiking backpacks. You ever notice how like a lot of homeless people have these like super fancy hiker backpacks? Like, where the fuck do you get that? They have like some ski-like walking stick and they have like a bandana. Like, some of them are doing better than I was at the time, that's for sure, and they were homeless. This place was like, I mean, it was like a homeless shelter. Like, the vast majority of people that work there were homeless. And then there was me, and they kind of like, I don't know. They kind of talked shit to me, belittled me, berated me, whatever. Then in the midst of that, I met Johnny Depp, and that totally just like blew my head up. I mean, that's like one of the most famous guys in the world. And then all of a sudden, I'm like at his house drinking fucking orange juice and like a martini glass, and he's doing Hunter S. Thompson impersonations, and the whole thing kind of blew my mind, but it also put me in a place where, I don't know, I had like, I got like a greater sense of self-worth, and I quit. Now during that time, and this is just reiterating what you guys already know, but just to get you there, in case you had missed the previous installments of the series. During that time, I had reconnected with a woman that I'd been friends with, God, probably since junior high. You know, somebody that I'd been in the trenches with. I'd gone through heroin addiction with her. She had always been one of like she'd always had a strong role in cannabis. Back when it was medicinal and now that it's recreational, she had always been a major force in that world, in the marijuana world. I reconnected with her and I reconnected with a lot of people after I got out of prison this last time. I think once I started being on YouTube and people would see me, a lot of people saw me on Al Prophet that I hadn't talked to in years, and a lot of people reconnected with me. I can't really remember how we got back together, but I know she approached me and we just started talking again. And during that same time period, I reconnected with that guy, Joey. It's not his real name, but he was one of the big like figures in medicinal marijuana in Santa Barbara. He was the first person that ever owned a club there. He's a legend. I never had really known him. I knew who he was and he knew who I was, but we didn't really cross paths. We just had mutual friends from back when I was like selling Molly and all that stuff in Santa Barbara. I connected with him. Remember, I had explained because his friend in Belgium became like a big fan of my YouTube videos. This guy Joey's friend was going through like a mental breakdown, and nobody could talk him into going to a psych ward. And so this guy Joey thought that because he was a fan of my videos that maybe I'd have some influence. And I was like, he's like, can you just message him on Facebook, encourage him to go to a psych ward? Perhaps you'll get through to him. I said, sure. It worked. And this guy went to a psych ward because of me. Well, this earned me a lot of points with this guy, Joey. You know, now there was this sort of, I don't know, he felt indebted to me. Now, around this time, I had explained that basically Sass had burned me for 70 grand, and then this guy Shamrock had vouched for Sass. You know, Jenny pistol whipped him. I wanted to take Sass. Shamrock jumped in the middle and said, hey, I have a grow operation. Whatever he owes you, I'll cash out tomorrow. I said, are you sure? You realize that you're vouching for him. I mean, this is going to become your debt. He said, I'm positive. I went to prison a week later. While I was in prison, and when I got out in 2013, I'd always thought about this debt. $70,000 is a lot of money. Now, the time that I had that taken from me, and remember, a lot of that was not even my money. It was my friend's money. That wasn't that much money to me back then. 70,000, I mean, it was, but it wasn't, you know. It's probably what 10,000 is to me now, you know. A lot of money, but, you know, it wasn't like, I mean, I made it pretty easily, right? So once I reconnected with this girl, and once I reconnected with Joey, or connected with him because I didn't know him before, I found out that this guy Shamrock, who had vouched for Sass when he got pistol whipped, owned the biggest marijuana farm in California. When I say the big, like how big are we talking? We're talking, I don't need 100,000 plants, some shit like that. Acres and acres of huge marijuana plants. And this guy Joey was telling me that Shamrock was the man now. Now, when I knew him, you know, I dealt with him before. He sold me 10 packs of weed, shit like that. But I never knew him to really be like a kingpin figure. He wasn't like Sass. Like Sass really was a kingpin. He owned 3 houses. You know, he always seemed like a piece of shit. Now, I didn't go into this last time, and this is kind of why I backtracked on this story so I could go into this. I don't know if I've ever brought this up, but the second time that I got arrested on my Fed case, I got arrested with my friend's girlfriend. She had driven me down there. You know, I didn't take my own car. I talked her into taking me down there because I had already been arrested a couple days before, right? So she went down there with me. In my story, the thing that I told everybody is I didn't want to tell people that I'd been arrested with a half pound of heroin and let go. I didn't rat, but goddamn, that certainly sounds like I did, you know? I didn't know at the time that I had been, you know, swept up in some big federal indictment, and I didn't realize that that's how it worked. They would just arrest you and let you go, because the actual conviction comes later once all the information's presented to the grand jury. So once they arrested us, I told this girl, I said, look, I just got arrested a couple days ago. I'm sorry for involving you with this. Don't say anything. I'll take the rap for you. She said, okay. So what ends up happening is after they let us go, she kind of starts flirting with the idea of telling on Sass. Now, her logic behind that is that Sass had raped a girl that we know. I knew the girl as well, and she was kind of like a high-end escort that would hang out with drug dealers. She was like this little blonde chick, right? She's probably like, 25. She was from San Diego, and she mostly dated pro skaters. But at a certain point, she had become a high-end escort. She was kind of just one of those girls, like, she was like a, Smurfette that was kind of passed around the scene, She'd have, like, matted jizz in her hair. She'd just be like, oh, yeah, I like to rage. We're like, oh, me too. Show her my matted cum stains on my hair. But what this girl that got arrested with me was telling me was that he had roofied her. And I'm not one of those people that automatically discredits a woman because she's a prostitute. In a lot of ways, it's an honest profession. There's not really bullshit to it. It's just like, yeah, you want to stick your dick inside of me? $9. You're like, I got 10. And they're like, I'll do anal, and then that's that. There's no like bullshit, It's not like another kind of profession where you're essentially hustling somebody. It's very like black and white, the parameters are tight. Anyway, this girl swore up and down that Sass had raped her. Now, Sass was an ugly motherfucker. I personally think that he is on my Patreon. I'll get to that later on in the series, but I think you're watching right now, you piece of shit. And, if you got a problem, it's not like I'm hiding. You can certainly find me. But this guy, he was, I don't know, he's like a bad looking guy, right? He looked like, imagine Santa Claus with a buzz cut, perpetually red, rosy cheeks. He just looked like a fucking date rapist, Like, he's the kind of guy that if you were into date raping too, you'd like see at a nightclub, you'd be like, hey man, where I can score some roof and all? He'd be like, I got you, dog. And he'd like pull some out of his back pocket. That's this guy. He just looked like a fucking date rapist. So I believed her when she said that he had raped this girl. Now, I certainly was not endorsing her cooperating with the feds. That was not something that I even, she had said that she wanted to have an ace in her back pocket. And that telling on Sass would be her ace, right? Because he had raped this girl. After she told me that, now I knew her because she was dating this guy that used to be roommates with Sass. And I'm friends with this guy to this day. So as soon as she had told me that, I get home, I called him, I said, hey, we need to talk, we need to smoke a blunt, and we need to discuss some things. So he came by my house, picked me up, we smoked a blunt, and we talked about it. And I said, look, I think that you should know, I think that your chick is cooperating with the feds against Sass. The reason that I think that is because she was kind of, I could tell that she was prodding me. She was kind of fishing, seeing if I'd be okay with telling on him, She's like, yeah, I think it's good to have an ace in our pocket, just in case we have to tell. And I'm like, in case we have to tell, what are they going to, threaten to chop our head off? I mean, we got caught with weight, all you had to do was keep your mouth shut. I'm taking the blame for it. She's like, yeah, but I'm saying if we had to tell on someone, he'd be the guy to tell on. So I tell her boyfriend, I go, look, I don't really give a shit about this guy Sass. He'd been my connection for a few years, at this point. And he treated me fairly well. But Thing is, if he was told on, it's not just him being told on. You know, he's connected to people that were manufacturing LSD, people that are, manufacturing MDMA, people that lived in Toronto, big boys. LSD availability is not what it used to be. There's only a few labs left in the world, and this was one of them. And he was basically right below the head people. So, I mean, he was high up there. He owned 3 houses. And you start talking about manufacturing LSD, you start talking about life sentences. So I thought that it was solid of me to warn this guy that I thought his girlfriend was cooperating. Well, that didn't go over well. First of all, me basically being a solid guy and warning him was interpreted as the fact that her and I both cooperated, and I was basically confessing to it. I'm like, look, man, later I had to call him and be like, look, why are you telling people that I snitched on Sass when I came to you and warned you that I thought your girlfriend was doing it? That doesn't even make sense. Why would I even bring it to your attention? For the longest time, this crowd of people thought that I was no good. They thought that I went out sideways. Ultimately, I went to prison. Nobody went to jail. None of these people caught cases, right? Which leads us to the future. So now I find out that this guy, first of all, Sass is nowhere to be found. And I'll find out more about him later. But at this point, I didn't know where he was. And apparently this guy Shamrock had it going on. And Joey told me that $70,000 to this guy was nothing. It was a drop in the bucket. So I'd come up with a plan he owned a dispensary a couple hours north of Santa Barbara. And my plan was to show up at the dispensary with these 2 homeless guys. They both look like Mexican mafia. Handlebar mustaches, shitty tattoos, old gray George Clooney peppery hair. But, the old Southsider version of it. I don't know. If you kind of can understand what I'm saying. They had like that very old gangster Hispanic look, American me guys, if they got old and started smoking meth and were homeless. Those kind of guys, right? We roll up there. I'm broke as all absolute fuck at the time. I mean, my YouTube had just come out. I just started making okay money, but not even enough to pay the rent yet. So when I find out that it was possible that I could get $70,000, of course I'm going to jump on it. I get these 2 homeless guys and we head over to this dispensary. Wait outside for a couple hours and these 2 guys come up. And this is how I ended the video last time. These 2 guys, they're both heavy set, kind of look like biker guys. They asked us what we were doing. I mean, we've been there for a couple hours. They said that, like, you guys have been here for a couple hours. What's up? And one of the Southsiders, I'd train them, right? I mean, for homeless tweakers, it's hard to get them to memorize even a sentence. Shamrock. They're like, all right, dog. Fucking Scorpio, dog. No. Shamrock. Fucking Spider Fifi, dog. From fucking Pueblo. What? From Pueblo? Fucking Spider Hanukkah, fool. Completely tweaker mush brain. Shamrock. Shamrock. Like the fucking Irish thing. Oh, dog. Fucking rock bows. But we had a long time to practice. So when these heavy-set biker-looking guys, they were security for the dispensary, when they asked what we were doing there, I'm proud to say that one of them was like, hey, the white boy right there's got a problem with Shamrock. We're here to make sure that it gets taken care of. I look at him, I'm like, I was so proud. I was like, Jesus, man. I'm going to buy you a Hot Pocket as soon as this is done. And some methamphetamine? Yeah, and some methamphetamine. So they end up calling about 4 more of them. So there's like 6 of them. One of them shows us that he has a gun, right? And they tell us that it appears that we have a major fucking problem if we're there because we have a problem with Shamrock. What's the issue, right? So now it's my turn to talk. And I say, hey, I don't say anything about money, right? I say, hey, I'm not here to hurt anyone. Neither are my associates. I got to call them associates. I got to play the part. I'm like, listen, my associates, you know, and they're like, hey, Spider Fifi. I'm like, shh, please, let me handle this. My associates and I are not here to create any issues. There's some unresolved business that I have with Shamrock. All I want is to sit down with them. That's it. And they're like, okay, well, this is the issue. You're sitting on a dispensary property. We're playing by the letter of the law. You show up with a couple guys in suits. We don't know if you're feds. We don't know what you are. What we do know is that you're in our home court. This is our hometown. We've already called. We got about 30 of our brothers, and that's why I thought they were bikers, because they called them brothers, and that's what outlaw bikers call their friends, their brothers. They don't even like talk like you and I would. Like, hey man, can you pass the butter? It's like, hey brother. And then they say some like weird biker shit. I don't know. But they always say brother. I don't know. That joke didn't come out right. All right. So basically they're telling us that we're in their home area and that they have a bunch of their friends coming to back them up if we don't leave. And one of them had a gun. Now, if one of them had a gun, my logic is that probably all of them have a gun. And it's very common in the dispensary world to have armed security. As, you know, I'm sure you can imagine if you're not from California, it's a cash business. So you have to have armed security in a sense. So they're telling us that we have to leave because they don't know who we are. Other people are coming basically as reinforcement. And now I'm just trying to like rationalize to them. You know, I'm like, listen, we drove up here from Los Angeles. We're not going to leave until I get a sit down with Shamrock. I don't care if your friends are coming. We have friends as well. Do you think we just came here rogue by ourselves? We have friends in the area. If you want to play that game, we can play that game right now. They're like, well, why don't you step out of the car? I'm like, all right. And I look at my homeless tweaker associates and they're just like, yeah, dog. They're like eating Cracker Jacks. One of them's like, oh, fuck, a fucking sticker, man. This is fucking bullshit prize. Fucking stupid ass shit. In Mexico, they give us brass keys, bro. Huh? Nothing, dog. Just take your time. We'll be right here. Glad I'm paying you the $100 a piece, you pieces of shit. So I get out of the car. Of course, I'm nervous to a degree. The thing that's making me not nervous about this situation is this. What they said is accurate. Dispensaries do play by the letter of the law because it's such a vague, new, gray area piece of legislation. It's illegal federally, but it's legal in the state. Therefore, dispensaries play by the rules. So that's going to my favor. Thing that's not going to my favor is, sure enough, more of these fuckers start pulling up. They're not on motorcycles either. They're showing up in SUVs. I think they were like Denali's or something. There's like 4 of them, full of people. They just pull up on my car. Now this is like a dirt lot. So I'm walking with them. They're like, hey, do you mind if we pat you down real quick? I'm like, no, dude. I was like, I'm just here to talk. That's it. You know, I have unresolved business with Shamrock. I just want to talk to the guy. That's all. I don't have a gun on me or anything. So I put my hands up against the wall. I'm fucking really good at that. They frisk me and they don't find anything. So now they bring me into this back office. So there's like 6 of them, plus like all their friends have pulled up in this place. It's like being in a Sons of Anarchy episode or something. It's pretty fucking wild. This is like 100% true. You know, this isn't even exaggerated one iota. I don't know what I was thinking in my delusional head, thinking that if I got a couple homeless guys that look like Mexican mafia, somehow we were going to intimidate armed security guards at a dispensary. But I don't know. I've always been one of those optimistic fellas like that. So they bring me into this office and they basically allow me to explain my side of the story. They're like, okay, now we're away from your friends. We're not going to hurt you. We just want to know why you're showing up with guys in suits to a marijuana dispensary. I go, okay. I tell them the entire story, you know, and honesty is not the best policy when you're dealing with law enforcement, with parole officers, probation officers. But I found in a situation like this, there's like a certain universal understanding, especially like man to man when you're burned like that. And I explained the whole situation, hoping that it might strike a chord with them, you know? And I'm not being threatening. I mean, I could have been. In my mind, Shamrock had blood on his hands because Jenny died after we got burned by Sass. Would she have died if we had not been burned for that money? Who knows? But she would have had more resources, and maybe she wouldn't have died, you know, on the run in Las Vegas the way that she had. I'm really not sure how it played out, but there was, you know, some emotional investment I had because of that. So I explained the whole thing, including that she had died. But I don't, again, I'm not threatening about it. They're like, all right, well, we can definitely, and I knew that they'd take it like this. They're like, well, we can definitely understand where you're coming from. This is one guy talking to me, but it's a couple guys, and, you know, they have like their arms folded. I think they were just trying to see if I was law enforcement. I think that was like the major thing. I think that's why they frisked me. I'm not sure. What they told me is that Shamrock wasn't even in town. It's like he's up in Humboldt or somewhere up there, I think Mendocino or like, I don't know, somewhere in Northern California. It's like he's away on business right now. This is the thing. We will make sure that he contacts you. He's a fair guy, and he'll have a sit down with you, and you guys can resolve this. And I said, look, we don't need to do all that. Why don't you just give me 70 pounds right now? We'll call it even. You know, I'll put him in my car and I can leave and the whole thing's squashed. They're like, it doesn't work like that. You know, what's to say that you're not just coming up here like inventing some sort of story so that we'll give you free, you know, weight? I'm like, well, why don't you call him? At least get him on the phone. They're like, he's in a spot where he's not getting service, which is absolutely true in the marijuana industry, especially when you're dealing with people that are up in like Northern California like that. So, I mean, I didn't really know what to do. It's kind of like a stalemate. We had come all the way there. I pay these guys, and I had told myself, I made a promise in my mind that I wouldn't leave empty-handed like that. I wasn't just going to like be like, yeah, okay, you know, whatever. That's okay. Give me some excuse and I'll just leave. But it was very clear that they weren't going to budge with it. There was no way to talk to them, so there's no way I could leave with anything anyway. Plus, all their friends had shown up, and who knew what was going on? You know, who knows what's happening with my homeless tweaker friends? They could be trying to suck these guys' dicks or something. There were some real hardcore street tweakers. I get up, kind of defeated. I go back to the car, and all these guys that are in, I think they were Denali's, they're parked next to our car, and they're all just kind of looking at us. I mean, they definitely, if anything was going to go down, we were completely outnumbered. Didn't even matter if we were all strapped. We were fucked. I get in the car, and they're like, hey, did you get the money? Did you get 70 pounds? I was like, yeah, dude, I have 70 fucking pounds in my pocket. He's like, damn, fool, you got burned like that? How does it feel to be abroad? He really said that too, and I was like, dude, shut the fuck up. Put it in reverse and I leave. Left empty-handed. You know, in my mind, just to like make myself okay with what had happened, I'm like, okay. At least I showed my presence with these two guys. Maybe it's not completely wasted because it'll get relayed to Shamrock that I showed up there with a couple Mexicans with handlebar mustaches. And on paper, I am connected to a cartel, so maybe he would think that, or maybe that was just wishful thinking. Whatever the case, I had to go back to my parents' house. I got my car, and I drove these guys back to West Covina. Now, something very bad happened as a result of this trip. When I was dropping these guys off, when I get to Santa Barbara, or when I get to back to West Covina where I was living, he asked me if I had any Suboxone for sale. And I was like, yeah. You know, how many do you need? He's like, I need, I think it was like 15 of them. 15 for $100, something like that. So I said, yeah. So I go inside my house because these guys were homeless literally a couple blocks from where we live. And this is before I was going to drop them off. So we get to my house because they had asked for that. And I go in and I get the Suboxone. I come back out and I was like, yeah, it's $100. He's like, all right, well, I don't have the money right now. Here, you can just have, or he's like, here, I'll just pay you back. And I was like so desperate for money at the time. I was like, okay, whatever. I was tired. I was defeated from the trip, whatever, right? A couple days later, I still haven't heard from the guy. Hey, Karina, you know, at this point, like, I'm one of those people that counts my chicken before the eggs are hatched, right? So I was already like looking at, you know, things that I was going to spend this money on. I was looking into Bitcoin, you know, I was looking into investments. I was looking into getting us a new car, or leasing one. And I told Karina, like, I sold her this whole dream about how we were going to be okay with the 70 grand and everything was going to be cool. I come back, I don't have anything. She's mad, you know, financially insecure at the moment. We were making a little money from YouTube, but, you know, we weren't going to be able to support ourselves. Then, of course, we had Mike living with us, which just really created a lot of strain on our relationship. And he was kind of like a weird guy or whatever. I don't think he had bad intentions, but he was just socially awkward, you know, and he started doing things that would piss Karina off. Like, she'd make him dinner, he'd take the plate and he would just leave it by the sink without washing it. Like, he'd leave the chicken bones on the plate. You could tell that, like, the guy was used to living with his mom and he just expected Karina to be his bitch. And Karina was not cool with that. Karina's like, fuck no. If I make this dude dinner, he has to at least do his own dishes. And, like, just simple stuff like that. He wouldn't thank her for dinner. These things start building up. So these guys with the Suboxone, a couple days go by. I didn't, you know, nothing. They didn't call or anything. And literally at this point in my life, $100 was like, I couldn't smoke a cigarette if I didn't get that money. You know, it was like, it was a lot of money to me at the time. And, like, for me, it's always been tobacco over food, unfortunately. So finally, you know, I call this guy, start blowing his phone up. He's not picking up. I feel super petty, like sweating him over $100, but I end up, you know, going up to the laundromat area where he lives, and I find him, you know, and I'm like, dude, why aren't you picking up my calls? Like, what's up? Where's my $100? So he's like, oh man, you know, of course, like, street person, he starts talking all quick to me, you know, talking all fast. Oh, bro, I was gonna pay you, but, like, hey, I've just been super busy. I'm like, been busy being fucking homeless? What have you been busy doing? Looking for a bigger tent to move into? Like, I just don't really understand how you could be busy when you have no responsibilities. So he gives me $60. I'm like, what the fuck is this? Where's the rest of the money? Like, hey, I don't have it, dog, but hey, I do have this. He pulls out a gram of black tar heroin from his pocket, right? And at this point, I'm on Suboxone and everything. I know I can't even get high, even if I want to anyway. So, you know, he's like, hey, you can sell this for $80, dog. You come out on top. He's like, this is some fucking fire too, homie. I'm like, all right. And I took it. I was like, cool. All right, we're squashed, you know? And in my mind, I'm thinking that I'm going to sell the heroin, you know? And I'm like thinking, okay, dude gave me $60, gave me a gram of quality heroin goes for about $80 in LA. I'm sure I can find someone in Santa Barbara. It's like $100. In my delusional drug addict mind, this is what my logic is, that I'm going to sell it. I'm on Suboxone, I can't feel it anyway. So I go home and I hide it, like, in my sock drawer. Next day, I wake up and I didn't take a Suboxone. Now, I had no plans on using anything. You know, that wasn't like something that I was like consciously planning. Now, I'm doing videos every day. I'm starting to like try to hustle more, put a GoFundMe up. That's helping me. I'm like surviving off of it. I'm trying to put money into making more money and make the blotters. Like, I'm really trying to hustle and do right. You know, like I'm approaching it almost like it's a poker game. Like, these are my chips. By the way, I'm waiting for Shamrock to call. You know, after all that shit, I left empty-handed and I was just expecting a call like a little bitch. Karina and I start fighting. I forget what we fought about, but it was a really bad fight. And now, a lot of tension had been mounting, you know, mostly because I'd moved Mike in. And she looked at that as like very irresponsible. But I believed in my documentary so much. I was like, you know, if this documentary is going to be revolutionary, there's not a lot of intimate portraitures of addiction, mental health, etc., that has this much footage. Just the story alone is interesting, but we had the footage to back it, and I really believed in it. But she was sick of me selling dreams. You know, she was sick of it. We get in this nasty fight. I don't remember what it is. And she's sick of Mike living there. And she's acting really fucking weird. Really like emotional, kind of like irrational. And, you know, I slammed the door in her face. I'm like, I'm going to go to the liquor store. You know, I had like money to get cigarettes now because that guy had paid me. I'm walking to the liquor store and she calls me and she's crying. And she's like, can't you fucking tell I relapsed? And I was like, what? What do you mean? And she's like, can't you tell I relapsed? You pushed me here. And I was like, what the fuck? So she's an alcoholic. So she's talking about relapsing on alcohol. And I'm just like, what the fuck? And so I had not taken a Suboxone yet, you know, and I'm a drug addict. What happens with drug addicts is we trick ourselves. We find excuses to use drugs. You know, what I should have done is I should have been really understanding, you know, saddened, but I got angry. What the fuck? Like, you've been lying to me. The way that I interpreted it is she's been lying to me this whole time. So I fly into this rage, right? And I come home. Now, I had needles at the house from when I was shooting Suboxone. I go downstairs into this room right here. Not sure where Mike was, but he wasn't, I think he was like on a walk or something. He wasn't there. Because I remember going into his room, took out a spoon, and I cooked a shot, and I fucking stuck the needle right in the crook of my arm, and I relapsed. And I didn't tell her, you know? I didn't tell her that I had relapsed. And that started my first run, you know? So this is right around Halloween, you know? And we're about to go up to Santa Barbara for Halloween. And now I'm full-blown addicted to heroin again, you know? I'd already been on a run for about 3 or 4 days. And I'm on parole, so I know that, you know, I could get tested anytime, and I don't even care. Now, Karina, I was being vigilant with her, so hypocritical, you know. I was, like, making sure that she wasn't drinking, but I'm shooting heroin behind her back. Now, a few months before all this, there's this guy, I don't know if I'd ever mentioned him, but I had this neighbor, and he was like a Peckerwood looking guy, you know, covered in like prison tattoos. This is a few months before I'd relapsed, right when I'd moved into this house. And I'd always see him when I was outside smoking a cigarette. He'd always be smoking cigarettes. One day he's like, hey, what's up, dog? I was like, hey. You could tell he was a convict. He could tell I was a convict. We started talking, and we started talking about convict shit. Like, hey, what prisons have you been to? I'm like, I've been to the feds, I've been to state. We started talking. He's a dirty white boy. Now, these guys have really bad reputations, you know? Like, basically, they're known for raping people. Yeah. How'd you like to be known for that? Him and Sass go around raping people together. And, you know, he had told me that he sold heroin. He's like, oh, I sell black. I was like, oh, no, man. I'm trying to do good. Like, my next door neighbor was a heroin dealer. So when I relapsed, I asked him if, because he's like, if you ever need anything, I got you. Just on the cup. Being my neighbor. I was like, all right, cool. So when I ran out of that gram, you know, when you relapse, a gram lasts for a few days. I called him. I asked him for some black. Said it was for a friend. And he came and he gave me like 3 grams for free. 3-pack, which is, you know, decent amount. So now I'm having to deal with this double life shit, you know. I'm high. I'm trying to do videos. I'm upset with myself for relapsing. I'm upset that Karina had relapsed, even though it was short-lived, because now I'm on top of it. I'm making sure that she's not drinking. And she made me feel bad about it, too. You know, she made me feel like it was definitely my fault that she had started drinking because this guy Mike had put so much strain on our relationship. So now I'm strung out, right? And I really haven't paid for any heroin at this point. The first gram that I got was given to me because the guy owed me money. Then my neighbor gave me 3 grams for free. So I'm just going for free this whole time. We end up going up to Santa Barbara. And I fucking hated myself for using. I hated it. I hated that I was a hypocrite. I hated that I was on parole and I was risking my freedom. I hated that I was, on drugs and around my child, which I promised myself I'd never do. And I learned the lesson that, like, being around people like that will inevitably bring you back to that lifestyle, Learned my lesson right there and then. But it didn't matter because it already had its claws in me again. And I just, it was like... I've gotten to the point with heroin addiction where I look at it more like a disorder, like bulimia. I don't even look at it like what it is, a drug addiction, because I'm fucking miserable when I do it, and I run out of veins really quickly. So we go up to Santa Barbara. I'm strung out, and instantly when I'm strung out, I start getting really bad acne. If you look back at some of the videos from that period, you can definitely tell that I'm loaded. I won't even watch those videos because it just makes me really mad at myself. You can definitely tell when I relapsed, the periods that I was using, and then when I got sober, and I've stayed sober since. And when I say sober, I mean like off of that shit, off of alcohol, off heroin, off all that. I still haven't had a drink, to this day. I don't fuck with alcohol anymore. And I won't, out of respect for my partner, because she's like a real deal alcoholic. So we go up to Santa Barbara, and Nico was Woody. Karina was the girl, I don't even know what her name is, and I was Buzz Lightyear. We get to my parents' house, and I remember driving up there. I had it hooped. I had a syringe, heroin up my ass, all that. We get to Santa Barbara, and I remember going, I'm already at a point in my run where I'm out of veins. The only place I can hit are these obscure veins on my leg. And, it takes 30 minutes, 40 minutes. And I remember being up at my parents' bathroom and, my mom going, "Come on, Ryan, it's time for you guys to go trick-or-treating." And I'm just sitting there in this Buzz Lightyear costume, digging around my leg for a vein, fucking hating myself, punishing myself for the hate that I had. And finally I find a vein. I'm having to make excuses. I have a stomach ache, all that shit. Same excuses I used to have as a kid when I'd beat off. "Oh, Mom, my stomach hurts." And then I just go in there and light candles and just straight get it, It's like the XXX of masturbation. Just some hardcore, using Crisco fucking cooking oil as lube. Yeah! Yeah, and now I'm doing the same shit, but I'm sticking needles in myself. So we go out, trick-or-treating, go to my old neighborhood. Gout out on heroin the whole time. I'm talking to Karina and someone goes, "Ryan?" And I look at the guy, I have no idea who he is, never seen him before. I'm like, "Yeah?" He's like, "Hey man, I watched your YouTube channel." It was the first time that a YouTube subscriber had recognized me. Karina was like, "How the fuck do you recognize him when he's dressed like Buzz Lightyear?" He's like, "That voice." Yeah. "I know a bitch when I hear one." No, I didn't say that. But yeah, he recognized my voice. And that was interesting, He had no idea that I was gout out of my mind on heroin. But that was just kind of an interesting thing that happened that night. So we finish Halloween. You look at pictures of me from that time period where I'm Buzz Lightyear. You can tell I'm strung out. It's obvious. I have these dark black circles under my eyes. I just look completely soulless. And really, again, I was miserable. So we go back to LA. I'm continuing to do my videos. I start writing. I had just finished that Delirium Tremens script. I'm trying to sell that. I'm talking to Paul all the time on the phone. He's getting worse and worse. You can just tell that he's having a cognitive slip. He knows that I'm using. I'm super honest with him, Jeff, all my closest friends. They know when I'm fucked up, and they're all very supportive. They definitely don't encourage that behavior, but they don't make me feel like a piece of shit about it either. They're kind of just there for me. That they've tried the tough love thing, and that always makes shit worse because then I go and I isolate, and they just want to make sure that I'm safe. I don't think it's enabling. I think it's just trying to offer light-handed support, So when I get back to LA, now I'm out of heroin. When I was up in Santa Barbara, I got another gram from one of my friends. This is another gram I didn't pay for. I just asked someone for something, and he's like, "I got you." One of my friends that sell it up there. I get home, and now I'm out of it. Now I need to buy some. So I call my neighbor. I'm like, hey, you know, I need something. He's like, hey, I don't have anything, but let me hook you up with my friend. I'm like, okay. So he hooks me up with the Southsider. I forget what the guy's name is, but he's like this short, bald guy, you know, and he gives me his number and I call him. I'm like, hey, I'm so-and-so's neighbor. Do you think you can come hook me up with something? He's like, I got you. So he ends up showing up in like a Cadillac. He's got like a couple like Chola chicks with him, and they've got a scale with tar all over it. Super sloppy. I was like, the first time I met him, I'm like, this guy's going to prison for sure. Like, zero fucks given. He has a gun in the car and shit. It's like, what do you need? I'm like, let me get a couple grams. Buy a couple grams. While I'm in the car, he's like, hey, do you do China White? And I'm like, yeah. It's like, I started doing heroin in Boston, for sure. He's like, all right, I'm going to give you this as a sample. He gives me like a fat, like a whole gram bag full of white powder. I look at it, and I'd been out of the heroin game when fentanyl had been introduced, right? Like, that was kind of like after my time. But I had read a lot about it. I'd done fentanyl patches, and I'd certainly done a lot of China White when I lived in Boston, but I didn't really have experience with fentanyl. I just knew it was a thing. I look at the gram bag, I'm like, is that fentanyl? He's like, no, man, it's China White, dog. You know, people always say that shit. They're showing you like a half-eighth of weed. They're like, hey, dog, it's China White heroin, fool. You're like, oh, yeah, it looks like it. Yeah, dog, it's fucking from Tibet, dog. All right. So, anyway, he gives me the heroin. He gives me the so-called China White, whatever. At this point, Karina is starting to suspect that I'm on something. Why is she starting to suspect that? Well, I mean, all of our fucking spoons have carbon burns on the bottom. I have acne. I can't get my dick up. I'm like nodding out and saying incoherent babble. You know, coming to and just saying random shit like, I don't think you have to be a minority to bowl. It's like, what? I don't think you need to be a minority to bowl. Not 3 strikes. That's for sure. Saying stuff like that, right? So she's starting to be suspicious that I'm on something. I run through this heroin. You know, I'm just starting to get really strung out. You know, and I don't have a lot of veins. I'm waking up early. That's like another sign that something's fucked up. And I run out of the black. And so I remember it was like 8 a.m. one morning. I have this China White or whatever the fuck it is. I'm out of heroin. Now, I have no idea how much to put in the syringe. When I used to shoot China White in Boston, it used to be teeny, like a bump of cocaine worth is what I would put in the spoon. I'm strung out though. I'm dope sick. I don't have time to like experiment with it. I don't have veins like that. You know, it's like the kind of thing where I don't want to just taste it, which is what you should do. You should always taste your heroin, right? See how strong it is. Instead, I just put a bunch in a spoon. And I'm talking about like a decent amount, you know, like as much as I'd put in for like a normal shot of black tar. Cook it up. Now, every heroin addict knows this. You know, for non-heroin addicts, you may find this interesting. You need certain light to find a vein, you know? So like this room, right? This room has this light. It might not be as good as the light in the bathroom upstairs. So sometimes like you're trying to hit in a certain light and you need like a brighter light or you need a bulb at a different angle to be able to find a vein. Sorry. So anyway, sorry, that was just some comment just came in and it was like, bro, you're slacking on the stories. You're a fucking bitch. Well, I know. So I'm downstairs, right? And like Mike it's to the point where I can't really hide my heroin addiction from Mike. I'm just like, well, I'll like go in his room like 8, 9 in the morning. I'm like, hey man, I got to do a shot. He's like, and I just start cooking it up and I'm like fucking trying to hit my neck in front of him. This guy's just freaking out. It's a circus show for him, right? This particular morning I'm trying to hit. like I said, I put, I think, a little too much China White in there, and I can't find a vein. So I'm like, I'm going to go to the bathroom upstairs. So I go upstairs to the bathroom. Nico's up. He's just kind of like watching TV. Karina's up like on her phone. It's like, hey, I got to use the restroom. She's like, okay. I go in the bathroom. I shut the door, but I don't lock it. I'm looking for a vein in my leg. Can't find one. Finally, I find a vein in my leg. Or I'm looking in my leg and I can't find one. So I go to my arm, right? So I have like right here, you know, once in a while I'll get lucky. That's like where I started with heroin. Once in a while I'll find like a little fraction of an inch of a vein that I can use right there, but it's very rare. Stick the needle in, draw up, blood just shoots into the barrel. I'm like, oh shit, that's lucky. Push down. Soon as the plunger goes down, I know that I overdosed. I know it. It's that familiar, suffocating. It's almost like one of those old cartoons where the light starts shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And I could just like feel reality kind of like bottlenecking into like nothingness. Open the door real quick. I'm like, hey, babe, I'm overdosing on fentanyl. Call 911. I'm an OD right now. And I just go out. Now, I don't know what happens after that, but Karina explained it to me. So what had happened, I fell on the ground. I like basically did a swan dive onto the hardwood floor. Fell on my head, and then I got up and I just started kind of like wavering. You know, there's video footage of this. I will definitely post it for the $20 tier. All right. She started taking footage of me, and I'm just kind of like wavering like this. I do that for a little bit, and then I guess I fall over again, and she had to call 911, and they came and they hit me with Narcan, saved my life. But I overdosed and I almost died, and now she knows that I'm on it. Now, when you do Narcan, the opiates come out of your system instantly. So I could have made a clean break from it right then, but everybody knows that it's not just the physical dependency with heroin, it's also the psychological dependence, right? And the problem at this point is that I'm deep in it psychologically. I'm numbing my pain. You know, there's a lot of unaddressed stuff from prison, the PTSD, probably some inherent mental illness stuff that I hadn't dealt with. And just at the time, you know, going without having like that comfort of being on heroin to being on it for even a short amount of time. I think I'd been strung out for like a week or 2 weeks maybe at the most. I'd only paid for it the last time when I'd overdosed. You know, it was hard to get away from that feeling. Hold on. So now she knew that I was using, you know, and obviously she's super concerned, and she's telling me that she wants me to get help and she'll stick by my side. And I'm telling her, yeah, of course, I want help. I'm not going to go back to it. I promise. Of course, I got, you know, right after I'm hit with the Narcan, within 30 minutes, I have a needle back in me. And I'm shooting up that fentanyl or whatever it is. And, you know, I was just in a really bad place at the time. And it sucked because the YouTube stuff had just started. And Sass and Shamrock were just about to come back, you know, right in the middle of this relapse. We'll definitely get into that in the next episode. Appreciate you guys for watching. I'm going to upload this now. And that's it. Palabra.